Good evening. Welcome to our Gita discussion. This evening we're concluding the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the three modes of material nature. A very wonderful chapter. So, good evening. Welcome to our Gita discussion. This evening we're concluding the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the three modes of material nature. A very wonderful chapter. So, good evening. Welcome to our Gita discussion. This evening we're concluding the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the three modes of material nature. A very wonderful chapter. So, good evening. Welcome to our Gita discussion. What's going on? This evening we're concluding the 14th chapter. Okay, little glitch there. So let's begin our discussion first with the invocation mantras that we sing in order to recognize our great fortune, coming in contact with a teacher who has illuminated our path with the torchlight of knowledge and given us ample opportunity to go back home, back to Godhead. Om Gyano Timurandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuro Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namah Tasmai Sri Guruve Namah Sri Chaitanya Manohistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamai Dadati Swa Podantikam Dadati Swa Podantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadishatadine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaurata Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Okay, so we'll be concluding this evening the 14th chapter, Three Modes of Material Nature, from the Bhagavad Gita. Just want to change something here. And then we'll begin. Okay. All right. Yeah. 14th chapter, and we are nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness, and we're on text. Okay. Yeah. I believe we're on text. Oh, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm on the wrong chapter. I'm sorry, the three modes of material nature. Here we go. Now we got it. Okay, this is text 21. Arjuna inquired, "O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior, and how does he transcend the modes of nature?" So here Arjuna is beginning this conclusive part, or this conclusive discussion on the three modes of material nature, at least here in the 14th chapter. Again, this topic is picked up in the 18th chapter, but here he's asking three questions to Krishna. And what are those questions? Well, the first one he asks is, what symptoms manifest in a person no longer influenced by the three modes of material nature? So Krishna and Arjuna in their discussion go into the three gunas, the three modes of material nature, sattva gun, raja gun, and tamagun, in great depth. So now Arjuna, after hearing about the influences that the gunas have over us, he wants to know if someone can transcend those gunas. And if so, the first question, what are the symptoms manifest in a person no longer influenced by the modes? So it'll be interesting to note, he'll ask, in this question, he asks, what are the symptoms? And then in the next question, he'll ask, what are the behavior? So symptoms refer, in this particular question, refers to what we can perceive of ourselves, what are the symptoms within ourselves. So symptoms refer to ourselves, are perceived by the person themselves. And the behavior, which is the next question, will be by action, by manifest action or behavior other people see. So the first question refers to myself, and the second question refers to what are other people seeing. So the symptoms. So, and then the second question, what is his behavior? And the third question is, by what practices does he achieve transcendence? So the symptoms that Krishna described in the next verses, 22 through 25, Krishna says, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of material nature. So in these particular verses, the first two questions are answered. The answer to the first question, which is primarily text 22, he is free from hankering and envy. And Krishna mentions that in the 9th chapter of the Gita. He tells Arjuna that you are eligible for this most confidential wisdom because you are not envious. Idam tute guyatamang pravaksham yanasuyave gyanam vigyanam sahitam yajgatva mokshasheshupa. So he talks about the being non-envious is the qualification for being a recipient of knowledge and a person who understands this knowledge, and a person qualified or capable of implementing this knowledge into one's life. So, neutral to the modes of material nature, freedom from hankering and envy, indifferent to the modes pushings, because the modes push. We see the mode of passion pushes us towards activity, to be active. Now, this is not a bad thing when we are active in a positive, progressive way, but when it is pushing us to act in a way which causes us to go down, to slide downhill, so to speak, then in a detrimental way, then this is not a good thing. And mostly the Rajagun does that because it's also mixed with Tamagun, or ignorance. So it causes us to develop a perspective of heightened enjoyment without seeing or understanding consequence. That's where Tamagun comes in, because Tamagun really means inability to see things as they are. Rajagun means action, being active, but active in a way without understanding the consequences. And we see that quite often, probably in our own life. We act in a whimsical manner and not really concerned about the consequences. Certainly we could have seen that in our youth, how we did so many things without consideration what the consequences would be. And sometimes those consequences catch up to a young person. I lost a nephew, 19 years old. He went to a party and he was drinking, and he took barbiturates while he was drinking, and his heart stopped. So at 19 years old, that was it. So, he did things he may have heard. You can't mix those two things without, seriously jeopardizing your life. He may have heard that, but he did not consider at the time the consequences of what he was doing. So Raja Gun, the action, going there and partying, and then Tamagun, not really considering consequences of one's behavior, and the end result for that 19-year-old was death. And we could see this over and over and over again, not only amongst young people, but people of all ages, acting without concern for consequences. So that's a very typical Raja Tamagun combination. And so pushing, the word that's used is these modes of material nature, these influences are strong and they push us. If you've ever gone swimming, I know, Jai Krishna, you live right on the beach there, so I'm sure you go swimming quite often. And when there's some kind of riptide and you go out, I know the last time I was in Puerto Rico, for instance, we were at the beach, and just about a mile down from us where we were swimming, the currents were particularly strong, and there were, like, I think in the same day, 3 or 4 tourists who lost their life. They were dragged out by the current, and they couldn't get back in, and they ended up drowning. So that is the nature of the modes of material nature. They push and they drag, and they cause us to do things without concern for consequence. I'm sure, Jai Krishna, going swimming every day, you probably have a heightened concern for the ocean and the tides and everything like that. So that is the result of knowledge and experience. So similarly, knowledge that Krishna is giving us in the 14th chapter, and experience which comes by implementing that knowledge or incorporating that knowledge within our life, it is our life saver. It is our life giver. In other words, we are given new life and new perspective, which is to our benefit, our ultimate benefit, without having to experience the detriments caused by the modes of material nature. So Arjuna is talking to Krishna, and he's saying to Krishna, these are the questions, and then the answers are given by Krishna. So neutral to the modes, this is what are the symptoms. When one is neutral to the modes, free from hankering and envy, indifferent to the modes, pushing, that means we may be pushed towards an inclination or a desire, but we don't act upon it. So that ability not to act upon that which can be destructive to us, that is also one of the symptoms of someone who is transcending or has transcended the modes of his material nature. And then the second question Arjuna asks is, what is his behavior? And Krishna says, equally disposed, and sees everything equally. Equally disposed, that's really what Krishna gives as this first definition for yoga. Samatvam, equipoised, equally disposed. He doesn't hate, he doesn't, overly attached, right in that position of neutrality, acts in that position of neutrality, and doesn't succumb to the inclinations or desires that may swell up within the heart. And if we look at our life honestly and see, what we do succumb to, and realize how it does impede our progress, then you could see that someone who doesn't succumb, never succumbs to the base desires or inclinations. It's not easily achieved. It's in an exalted position. And Krishna is saying that is symptom of someone who has transcended the modes of material nature. When someone has not transcended the modes of material nature, they are pushed by passion and ignorance, and in their behavior you see it. They succumb to base desires. So in their action you can actually see it. So he says, never acts whimsically, which means, there's gravity. We understand the consequences. Whimsically means not really concerned with consequences, just doing it on a whim. So this concern for the consequences is, again, it's a symptom of the behavior of someone who has transcended the modes of material nature. Rather, acts in full surrender to Krishna and with fixed determination. So this is behavior that is beyond symptoms, but is actually perceivable in someone. Like, for instance, a classic example, of course, is Srila Prabhupada. We saw, personally experienced Srila Prabhupada. He never succumbed to whimsicality. He was always grave in the sense, he was humorous too, not grave, and he couldn't tell a joke or didn't know how to be lighthearted. He was both funny and grave, which means that he every moment that you were with Srila Prabhupada, you could see his behavior reflected meditation or focus on the Supreme. Everything that he said and every action that he performed was in relationship to Krishna. And that person who's free from the influence is now influential. When you are influenced by the modes of material nature, you're in that category of influenced. You're being pushed. So even a devotee who is well-intentioned doesn't have the potency, or doesn't have a high degree of potency based on how much they succumb to those influences. But the potency to affect and influence others comes on how free am I from the influences of the modes of material nature. And therefore, when I reach that exalted position, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Na Sochiti Na Kankshati. When I'm on that platform, the Brahma Bhuta stage, I become influential. And we've all had experience of associating with someone on an exalted platform like that. Or if not, at least the experience of, if you haven't met Srila Prabhupada personally, but maybe you had the good fortune of having the association of an advanced disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and you could see that person influenced you by their words and by their actions. In fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that there's two ways. One is by words. An exalted person speaks lofty philosophy, but a person really is influential by the example and the way they behave. And sometimes it's not understood. We have examples in Chaitanya Charitamrita, different personalities who just weren't understood. Their behavior wasn't understood. But for instance, Kolavich Sridhar. Kolavich Sridhar was a very poor devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his livelihood was selling bananas or anything in relationship to bananas. bananas, banana leaf cups, etc. So he didn't make much money, and he lived in an impoverished situation. His house was no more than a hut, and a ramshackle hut at that. It wasn't taken care of very nicely. He didn't have the money to take care of it, so the roof would leak. His clothes were tattered, and at night, in separation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he would cry and yell and exhibit, of course, symptoms of ecstasy. But to his neighbors didn't understand him, and therefore they just thought he was a crazy man. He was crazy, and sometimes very advanced devotees are thought to be crazy, because they do not have attachment or concern for the material world and the material body, or satisfying the material body, etc. And therefore, people say, well, how can you live like that, or how can you not be concerned about income, and what do you do, besides chanting to have fun? Maybe you've had a person say that to you. Wow, you guys follow these 4 regulative principles, and you chant, and what do you do to have a good time? But a person who's on that exalted platform, their good time is within the heart. You may not be able to see it, but the self-satisfied Atmaram is not hankering for anything other than to continuously, with great determination and great enthusiasm, chant Krishna's names. So when one time Srila Prabhupada, because sometimes Prabhupada had a very grave look, and someone asked Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, are you in ecstasy? And Prabhupada said, always. And he said, his response was, well, you don't look like you're in ecstasy. And Prabhupada's response was, what do you know of ecstasy? People, when they think ecstasy, or they're laughing and dancing around, yes, that is symptoms of ecstasy. Laughing and chanting and dancing and feasting and all those things. But there's also a contemplative ecstasy that's there, that one can experience, an ecstasy in separation of the Supreme. So that can also, that ecstasy oftentimes is described as being the most intense type of ecstasy, the love and separation, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, particularly in his Gambhira Leelas, when he was in the room that was provided for him, and it was called Gambhira, and he experienced a great deal of separation, crying and scraping of his face against the wall, and hands, nails on the ground, scratching the ground, just wondering, where is Krishna? Where is my Krishna? So the ecstasy can come in the form of jubilation. The ecstasy can come in the form of sorrow and separation. So this is, one who is deeply there. And Prabhupada said, what do you understand of ecstasy? Which is exactly right. We may have a glimmer of happiness in the material world, and senses interacting with the sense object. Certainly a person is drinking or eating a good meal or having a sexual experience, etc. There may be some slight reward, but it's over very quickly, and there's quite often there's reactions in that regard. So this behavior of consistently experiencing, being neutral, and experiencing a desire to serve, that's another symptom of behavior, just to serve selflessly the Supreme without doing it for reward or for recognition. Sometimes, performance of bhakti is tainted by the modes of material nature, and therefore to do service so that one may be recognized, even to take on the responsibility of, like an ashram, like sannyas, because there is recognition now. I know this to be a fact because, certain friends of mine who took sannyas admitted that it was to get, respect and recognition, which is the wrong reason, really, for taking on that ashram and taking on that responsibility. Better, as Prabhupada told me personally, he said, best to be brahmachari. This was in a meeting in 1975 in Atlanta. Prabhupada was talking about brahmacharya life. One has his arm for his pillow and his chadar for his blanket and the floor to sleep on. What does a person need more than that? So Prabhupada says, so this brahmachari life, this life of renunciation, makes living very simple and easy to focus on serving the Supreme. But, Prabhupada said, there was a caveat to that. He said, if you cannot do that, then better you are an honest grihastha, that you take on a wife or a husband, and you, in the mood of service, in the mood of duty, but Bhagavad Dharma, not just Dharma, but Bhagavad Dharma in relationship to the Supreme. Better you do that. That will be the best way to achieve it. So those are the first two questions. So then the third question, by what practice then Krishna concludes his statements in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, text 26, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So it's not only knowledge, that we're interested in knowledge, but we also have to assimilate that knowledge. So assimilating knowledge of the modes of material nature gradually elevates one to the platform of equanimity. One engaged in full devotional service, however, immediately and automatically transcends. And he manifests the characteristics which we read in text 22 through 25. The word avyabhicharena implies having the tendency to render service to no one except Krishna. Because the devotee is serving Krishna exclusively, he has no opportunity to serve the modes. So you see the fullness. Prabhupada called it, once Vishnu Jan Swami asked him, how do we avoid Maya? And Prabhupada said, you must have the no-gap philosophy. And Vishnu Jan Swami looked, he was a little bewildered. He said, what does that mean, Srila Prabhupada, no-gap philosophy? So Prabhupada took his bead bag and he started chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. Then he put his bead bag down and he sat down at the harmonium and he did bhajan. And then he got up and he, started cleaning the room and then cooking. So Prabhupada said, in this way, everything that we do is in service to Krishna. And we leave no gaps so that Maya can enter. So that's what the no-gap philosophy is. That we do not leave any gaps, any holes that Maya will come in and fill. because the devotee is serving Krishna exclusively. He has no opportunity to serve the modes. This is the direct process of transcendence. Therefore, he immediately reaches the Brahman platform, where the modes of material nature have no power over him. On that platform, which is fully spiritual and beyond the modes of material nature, pure devotional service begins. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan, who is a great acharya in our line, said the following. He says that by worshiping the feet of our guru, our spiritual master. Why? Because developments of a service mood as opposed to an enjoying mood. So in what is being said here by Baladev Vidyabhushan is by serving the teacher, tadvidhi pradipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam ganinas tattvadarshana. So by serving the tattvadarshini, the person who is situated in the truth, the spiritual teacher, then we learn the science of humility, service in humility. And therefore, when we do that, we do not get overwhelmed by envy and self-centeredness. The whole, when Krishna describes the characteristics of knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, text 8 through 12, I believe, he gives like 20 items of knowledge here. The first two that Krishna says is humility and pridelessness. So humility, humble state of mind, not thinking more of oneself than what we really are. And pridelessness means that sometimes we think we're advanced, and so we develop a pride. Oh, I'm such an advanced devotee. But Krishna gives the two items of knowledge. The first two items of knowledge is humility, genuine humility, and pridelessness. That we do not become proud, thinking that we are so advanced devotees. That doesn't work. Thinking of ourselves as my guru's servant and fixing his order as our life and soul frees us from Maya. That's why Krishna gave that statement in the 4th chapter, 34th verse of the Bhagavad Gita. He's giving the formula by which we can transcend the modes of material nature. So following that formula frees us from Maya, frees us from its influence, the influence of the modes. The modes may dictate a variety of allurements to us, but devotees surrendered to their guru follow the guru's instructions and do not heed the pushings of the modes. In other words, the intelligence which comes from following those who are whose intelligence is situated in Shuddha Sattva, or pure goodness, pure transcendence, that also situates us on that platform if we are following to the best of our ability. And therefore we know not to heed the pushings of the modes of material nature. This attitude of devotion and service, not merely the ability, like that of a jnani, to discriminate between the modes and the pure soul, carries them to perfection. Bhakti is for both the sadhaka, the practitioner, and the siddha, the one who is in a state of perfect devotion, or the perfect devotee. Karmis and Gyanis must eventually give up their processes as they attain higher stages of consciousness. But one need never give up bhakti. Bhakti is intrinsic. Bhakti is the nature. As water's dharma is what it is its liquidity, as fire is its heat and light. So the dharma of the soul is bhakti, to perform bhakti, to perform loving and devotional service to the Supreme Lord. That is the nature of bhakti, and that is the behavior of one whose heart is filled with bhakti. Even karmis and gyanis who do not desire the shelter of Krishna service as their ultimate goal must take to devotional service in order to achieve the fruit of their processes. What's being referred to herein is like Shankaracharya, the primary exponent of impersonalism. He even realized he could not convince anybody to give up bhakti. He knew that the nature of the soul is to perform bhakti. So even in the process to achieve oneness with the Supreme, or Brahman realization, bhakti was recommended. And then bhakti was recommended as a purificatory practice. And then when one became purified to a certain degree, then he would achieve Brahman. So at no time in any yoga system or philosophy is bhakti given up. It's the difference in pure or Shuddha bhakti, pure bhakti yoga, is that one always, that is both the means and the end. Pure bhakti is the means, if you execute it purely, and it is also the end. That when we become purified by the purificatory force of bhakti, then we rise to a platform where we're performing bhakti, the same bhakti, the chanting, the deity worship, the studying of Shastra, the association of Vaishnavas, the traveling to sacred places. A person situated in perfection is doing the same things. The only difference being is there's never a tinge of the mode's material nature in the execution of devotion. While in the Srimad Bhagavatam it describes that bhakti can be tinged by passion and ignorance and even goodness. So the modes of material nature can give one's practice a certain coloring. For instance, if you practice bhakti in the mode of ignorance, then anger can be there in the execution of your devotion. And anger should never be there. That's what indifference is. One should never experience that anger. Okay, this is the last verse of chapter 14, the three modes of material nature, where Krishna says, I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So herein, the definition, what is Brahman? It's immortality, it's imperishability, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Sridhar Swami, who's one of our great commentators on the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the earlier commentators on the Srimad Bhagavatam, says the following: Krishna is the concentrated form of Brahman, as the sun is the intensified form of light. Although Krishna and Brahman are non-different, Krishna is the support. He's the basis of Brahman. The completeness of Brahman is Krishna. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. There, the completeness. Krishna is the complete whole. And even though there are parts and parcels of Krishna, those parts and parcels, if removed, do not diminish the whole, the complete whole Krishna at all. So this wholeness, completeness, just consider in the Brahman conception or the Advaitin philosophy, there is no conception of form. Form is considered as part of the illusion. But that makes the Supreme Eternal incomplete, because everything in the Supreme Eternal is perfect and complete. So as there is no personal form, purely transcendental, there has to be form, purely transcendental. In other words, in order to be complete. How can we possess something that the perfect and complete does not possess? That means we would be greater than. Makes sense? We would be greater than, because we possess form, but the Supreme Absolute does not possess form. Doesn't make any sense. The Supreme Absolute does not possess material form. That is the distinction. That is the understanding. Does not possess material form, but whose form is purely spiritual. Like Krishna says in the 4th chapter, Ajo Pisan Avyayatma. Ajo, unborn, transcendental. My body never deteriorates. Krishna describes that in the Bhagavad Gita. I have form, but this form is spiritual, purely, and never deteriorates. So that's the distinction. And this form, this transcendental form of the Absolute, never forgets. It's never put into a position of forgetfulness of his position. And that's what Krishna tells Arjuna. Difference between you and me. You, many births we have had in the past, I remember all of them, Krishna says, whereas you do not. So this kind of position must be there in order for the Supreme to be Purnam, complete. Complete in and of itself. Otherwise, there is incompleteness. Like in Brahman, there is no form, then where is the completeness? So it's not that in bhakti we reject the notion of Brahman, or even the notion that the soul can merge into Brahman. We do not reject that. But what is rejected is the notion that there is no ability to have personal relationship with Param Brahman, the supreme person, concentrated form of Brahman, which is actually the position of Krishna and all of Krishna's expansions. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who is another great personality, spiritual master in our line, says, because everything is dependent on Krishna, if one worships Krishna with a desire for impersonal merging, he will merge into Brahman and attain the nature of Brahman. So because Krishna is Brahman, Brahman emanates from his form, And that form is concentrated Brahman, concentrated into the form of Krishna. So if one wants that, and Krishna also says in the 4th chapter, as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Which means how they act towards me, I will reciprocate with that. So if one is acting towards Krishna as an impersonal feature, then Krishna will reciprocate. But Krishna holds the right to reveal the true nature of his spiritual form, because that person is not doing what is required to actually qualify to understand that there is a pure spiritual form, concentrated Brahman, known as the Supreme, or God, or the Unlimited. So it makes a lot of sense when you understand it that way. Arjuna, besides these other spiritual masters in our line, Arjuna has also declared Krishna to be that. He's called him Param Brahman, Param Dhamma, you are the supreme Brahman, you are the supreme abode, you are the supreme purifier. All these things are there, Arjuna confirms. So, yeah, I think we've gone through a lot. This is the concluding verse. I'm going to stop here for now and ask if there are any questions. Anyone like to ask a question or have a realization or like to share an experience? Be happy to do it. No? Okay. So tomorrow is Ekadashi, and it's also the first day of Bhishma Panchaka. So this is the last 5 days of this month of Damodar, and the performance of austerities in love and for the pleasure of the Supreme during these last 5 days even heighten one's devotion, even makes it even greater. So do what you can, chant a little extra, do something a little extra during these last 5 days. Follow Ekadashi nicely tomorrow, and that will be wonderful. So until we see each other again next week, next Wednesday, you have a happy, healthy, and holy week. Until that time,